Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last session. It's been a great tech law summit this year, as usual, thanks to Charlie Bingham. And we're happy to have this last session play it forward and talk about some things about what you all should expect in your careers and what you should think about in terms of looking forward and how things are going to go. So initially, let me just kind of introduce the panelists. So of course we have the incredible Charlie Bingham, founder of this Tech Law Summit and Assistant General Counsel at CrowdStrike, a Howard alum, class of 2008, for those of you who didn't know. Then we have Michele Cober, Executive Director of External Affairs and Strategic Alliances at Verizon, also a Howard alum, same class. Hey, Michele. And we also have Adrienne Williams, president of the Black Entertainment and Sports Lawyers Association, graduated from Seton Law School in 1998, and also lots of experience that Adrienne will give you from working at Microsoft and Meta and a few other places. So we're very happy to have you all here as panelists today. And so I think what we're going to do first is ask what you guys think playing forward means to you. So well, actually, no, let's start by having you guys give a little brief description of your employment history, kind of your background, kind of quickly, like not more than 2 minutes apiece, please. So we'll start with that first. Well, Adrienne, you want to start out?
Sure. And I'm the only panelist that didn't go to Howard, but Howard's my maiden name. Does that count? Okay, sorry. No.
You're honorary, Adrienne. You know you're honorary.
No, wonderful to join you all today. Thank you so much, Lita. You all, I have the pleasure of serving on the board of BSLA with Lita Rosario-Richardson for some years. So I'm very honored to join you. Well, I started my career actually in entertainment law. And so I started at a firm doing transactional entertainment law before I went in-house at a record company. And my job in-house was to figure out what digital distribution was going to mean for the label and for the music industry. And this was 2000. So this was 4 years prior to iTunes. So a lot of deals, strategic deals, and trial and error, and even homegrown initiatives to try to be ready for streaming, what is now streaming, at a time when the technology was awful, at the time of dial-up speeds and things like that. Some of you may be aware of.
Maybe.
way back then. So anyway, so I was at the in-house at the record company for about 4 years. And then there was a lot of consolidation. Streaming, digital distribution was there and had absolutely disrupted the economics of the music business. And so my career shifted. I spent a little bit of time at Discovery Channel in Maryland, where I was focused on production and talent and merchandising deals before a good friend and mentor, Bruce Jackson, reached out to me and said, you should consider Microsoft. I mean, he did know about my focus and interest in digital platforms, digital streaming. Notwithstanding that, at first I was a little reluctant. I didn't think I didn't think I was what Microsoft was looking for. I didn't view myself as your traditional tech lawyer. I thought of it as patent lawyers who, as you know, it's a whole separate thing, a whole separate patent bar. And I thought, this isn't for me. But he stuck with me, and I talked to other attorneys that I knew, like Elka Suber and Sonia Johnston, who also were BSLA members, friends and mentors of mine, and had joined Microsoft before me. So I was fortunate to join Microsoft in 2005 with other, I wasn't the only. I didn't have to be the only. And not only that, I was well supported and set up for success. I spent over 15 years at Microsoft in various roles, supporting sales and marketing channels, supporting consultants and engineers and AI data strategists, supporting startup communities, developer communities, supporting customers and partners before I transitioned and went over to Meta, where I was the global lead for WhatsApp Business. I was impacted by layoffs at Meta, and so now I advise. I'm in private practice, and I advise startups. So too early to announce the company or companies that I'm affiliated with, but happy to be here with all of you today.
Thanks, Adrienne. Michele.
Hi, everyone, and it's so great to see Charlie, and nice to meet you, Lita and Adrienne. I'm Michele Cober. I'm at Verizon now, and my path was very non-traditional to start. I have 2 music degrees before I went to law school, and then I shifted and went to law school, and then had a very traditional path coming out of Howard. I did a judicial clerkship in the District Court of Maryland. And then I went on into big law. I was at Kirkland & Ellis first as a general litigator. And then I was at Hogan Lovells also as a general litigator, and moved a little bit into arbitration when I got to Hogan. Did 0 tech law before I came to Verizon, had never done any regulatory law before I came to Verizon. And when I shifted over to becoming an in-house lawyer, it was the very first time that I had done any of this subject matter. So my path in tech started late in my career. Came over to Verizon 6 years ago this month, 6 years ago, March, and started off as a counsel in our federal regulatory group, which was all administrative law, all tech, all things tech and tech policy, and advocating at the FCC for the very first time, 10 years out of law school. So I had a lot to learn. And so then I'm in my second job at Verizon now, where I am in a quasi practicing role, but not completely practicing. I'm doing public policy and external affairs, still using all of the things that I learned in my first job here at Verizon, but now using it in a different way. And so it has been a great journey so far, and I'm excited about things to come. So it's my honor to be here and impart the things that I have learned along the way. And I am proud as a Hustle alum to have finished my first semester last fall as an adjunct at the law school. So if we want to talk about paying it forward, I can talk about how being an adjunct is one way that you can do that.
Oh, that's very good. Very nice. So just as a little context, so we have a few different generations here. I graduated from Howard Law School in 1986. So just to give you some perspective of how this whole circle goes. I started at Big Law, ended up getting into the music business because of colleagues of mine who I went to Howard undergrad and Howard Law. And that's kind of how I made my transition from corporate law. So next, Charlie. I know most people know it, but why don't you go ahead and break it down for us?
First of all, I'm so happy to see you all. I started a new job, and so I wasn't, it's gotten to the point where I was able to delegate a lot of the planning that I used to do, and being meticulous about who's going to be on the agenda, making sure we got different generations. So I'm so happy to see you, Lita, and Adrienne, great friends. Love Lita and her husband. They're my partners. I have a very non-traditional path as well. I wanted to be a rapper, so I majored in mass communications. I have an undergrad degree there, and I have a master's in teaching. I just kind of stumbled into the law. I tell people it's by the grace of God. Great mentors who I listen. I listen to people. If you tell me to reach out, I'm going to reach out. And so because of that, one of my mentors, Rosario-Richardson, who's the CEO of the Association of Corporate Counsel, helped me to get a job at a large law firm. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. Great experience, had a generalist background, M&A, private equity, VC, technology transactions, government contracts. I was the result of a layoff in the economy. And so I went to the government, which I tell people was like going from using 115% of your brain, because you're kind of on an island sometimes in the law firm, and there's a lot that you don't know, to cruise control and using about 60% of my brain in the government. I was an overachiever. They would turn the lights off on me like, it's time to go. You're making us look bad. I had OCD. I've always had OCD of I got to finish what I start. But they weren't going for that. It's like, we're all walking to the metro, let's go. From there, I joined Microsoft, where I met Adrienne and Bruce Jackson and my lovely mentor, Daphne Forbes, who was my manager. I started doing federal work. One of our state and local government attorneys left, and Daphne encouraged me. I was hesitant, like, I didn't say I know how to do state and local government. She's like, you're bright, you'll handle it. Did that, expanded to educational work, professional services, and ultimately I raised my hand to do global partner work with Elka Suber, who's another African-American who's, Elka was on the board of BSLA as well. You're going to hear BSLA a lot. If you ever get a chance to go to BSLA, it's love. From Microsoft, I went to a company called Splunk Cybersecurities to help them set up their global partner role. Was there for about a year and a half, and I left, and I'm now assistant general counsel at CrowdStrike, which is the top, if I say so myself, cybersecurity solution. Their mission is to stop breaches, and so kind of had a long winding path. You on mute, Lita.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes. So Michele, can I just ask you this? Is it fair to say that you're a lobbyist or no?
I'm not a lobbyist.
You're not a lobbyist.
Yeah,
Okay.
the difference is, for those, if the students on here, so I do not have direct contact with legislators. My contact is with public interest groups, consumer groups, civil rights organizations. And one thing that I did not know before I started this job is the involvement of all of these groups in policy. And they are very active. I mean, we see the rallies, the marches, but I think it may have been Al Sharpton who said that there's no action without a law or legislation. You have to use all of the movement to then try to get legal change. And so that is the difference with what I do. So I work with the groups who are behind a lot of the policy work, not directly with legislators.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Because I think the students need to know that. And I think sometimes lobbyists get bad names. You know, there's kind of this negative aura that's around them. But I think the students should know that there are lots of people who do lobbying who are perfectly legitimate, competent people who do a real job. That's important. So, all righty. So next, let's just have a little bit, Adrienne, why don't you tell us a little bit about what types of different areas of law come into your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Or the tech law.
Yeah, so thank you, Lita. I'll start by just kind of describing a few different types of roles or organizations. And you know, and Charlie will have similar examples as well. But Microsoft, for example, had a huge law department organized by different, you know, groups and practice areas. And so I'm going to focus on four kind of major buckets of practice, and that's excluding your HR, your real estate, your kind of, you know, teams that all companies have. But from a tech perspective, think about the regulatory teams. They are the subject matter experts that are always going to stay abreast of the current laws and emerging, burgeoning laws and the global laws, because as you know, certainly lawyers that are practicing, but you all may also be studying as while you're in school, GDPR. We were all practicing before GDPR came online, and while it's a rule for the EU, it has impacted.
Yeah, why don't you tell them what that is so they'll know?
It's the Global Data Protection Regulation that the European Union enacted in 2018. And I can tell you that while it is only applicable there, it has actually affected privacy laws and approaches and commercialization of products globally. What ends up happening is that the first jurisdiction to enact laws often becomes the model. And so you see, you know, Latin America, and you see different states in the US. The US doesn't have a national law, but there's more work on that. That's the way that we're headed. But what ends up happening is a law like that comes out, and then most companies, to simplify business, use that as like the bar, rather than having a network of all kind of various regulations, for your business. So regulatory law, think also competition law. That was a big thing around the time that I joined Microsoft. It was under the consent decree because various states in the U.S. had deemed Microsoft a monopoly for its operating system. Think consumer protection laws and truth in advertising, and things like that. So just think about all of that under regulatory. The other thing is product practice groups. Those are the lawyers that are frontline for the teams that are actually developing and launching products. And so whether your product is a component, a chip, or whether your product is the apps we all use on our phones, the lawyers frontline get to see the behind the scenes. How does this product work? What does it do, and what are the rights that the users who license or purchase this technology have, and making sure that those terms of use accurately depict how the company uses, for example, data, right? And as well as how the user can use that product and pass it on from there. Commercial teams, which are start to think agreement based. So they're the teams that are responsible for all of the agreements in how that particular product is going to be commercialized. If it's something that we're selling units of, or media reproductions of, like chips, then it may just be a set of terms that's kind of delivered when you open the package. You get a new phone, and there are a set of terms that nobody reads. We're the lawyers that write those, right? Think also about when you have a component that becomes part of another tech company's product, like the software and the apps that are pre-installed on your gaming console or your phone or your Mac or PC, right? So the terms for those device partners, and then your terms for other business partners that make their a whole nother set of their business around solution building. So if you think of an Accenture or other companies that you can hire to help you create your technology platform for your business or your university, then there's a set of terms that the commercial team has to consider for that as well. And then I want to talk about the sales and marketing team, and that team is kind of connected across products and commercialization. But again, that's the team that kind of thinks about truth in advertising. Are we being specific and clear about how the product actually works, and is the marketing that's consumer facing or enterprise facing accurate and saying the same thing? So you're going to have a whole team that's focused on making sure that there's no new liabilities or no misstatements in how you actually go to market with the various products. Lita, you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you add to that at all? Sorry, guys. I'm trying to keep the background noise out of here. Michele, can you add anything to that in terms of, from your perspective and your practice?
Yes. So Adrienne went over very broad areas, but each one probably has another 20 underneath of it. And then you also have to think about federal versus state. But for me, when I came to Verizon, it was all about our regulatory practice. So we have a whole regulatory team. And like I said, within that, there could be 25 different subject matters. The thing that I think is important for one thing that I think is important for the students to realize is that you also, on the regulatory side, you're dealing directly with these government agencies, maybe more than one. For Verizon, with a wireline business, a telephone business, we are heavily, heavily regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. And so we have all sorts of different proceedings that may be taking place that affect us. There are also committees at the FCC that I sat on one related to diversity, others sit on one related to others, like accessibility or other subject matters. So there's the legal practice under each of these umbrellas, but then you may have interactions with government agencies. Charlie mentioned the lobbyists in the chat. You may have interactions on Capitol Hill. You may have interactions with state and local government officials. You also have, just because of the business that we're in and how tech affects everybody, your connectivity connects everybody, you have a lot of other interested parties too. So, you know, your homeowners association cares about where there's going to be broadband deployed, or, you know, the school wants to make sure that they have devices. So there's just so much in this whole world. And I think that one thing that I didn't realize until I left the law firm, left my bubble of civil litigation, is that there's so many different stakeholders out here. And so I think that we just need to make sure we broaden our focus. You don't have to do a deep dive into everything, but just be aware that there are all of these other voices in the conversation, because we can really get bogged down in what section 12.6b says and how we're interpreting these one or two words. But what you really need to worry about is what this consumer group over here is about to do, and sue everybody and have everybody's life miserable for the next 12 months. So there's some perspective here too. So know all of these areas, but don't lose the forest for the trees. And that will just make you a much more valuable part of the team too, to know your craft, but then also keep an eye on the surround sound, because there is so much going on in the tech world. And also, you did mention AI, which is on everybody's mind and is going to be the subject of courses for the next 10 years in law school that I'm sure Lateef is probably drafting up a syllabus for right now.
That's right. Charlie, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. I love Michelle's point of basically keep your eye on everything. In my role, that has served me well. I put the list. I work with all of those stakeholders in my role. I know enough about each one of them to know when someone don't know what they're talking about in those roles based on my experience. AI will fall under kind of the IP or intellectual property group. But for global partners, in my role, what I found is you have to keep the big picture in the forefront. And I have to consult with all of these internal stakeholders regarding, all right, when you're partnering with someone, you're allowing them to use whatever product or service that you have. And so you want to make sure the contract protects the intellectual property, which is kind of what allows the company to make money. You want to make sure that in their use of your intellectual property, or in whatever they decide to build it in your technology, that they don't use it in such a way that it exposes you to claims for data privacy and security like GDPR. For competition, you got to make sure globally, if I tell you you can only use it in Australia, then you only use it in Australia because you're getting special pricing. And if we give that pricing to anybody else, it could upset the whole global ecosystem. Regulatory, you gotta, what do we need to comply with? I just like to say all applicable laws, but you have people who will go down to the nitty gritty. Are there government customers who are going to receiving this? How are we going to go to market together? Are you allowed to release a commercial without our consent? For compliance, we got to make sure that we're doing business with the right partners. You're not doing business in shady areas, are you? We got to do our due diligence. We got to make sure that we comply, or we work with the product attorneys to make sure that, all right, is this, can engineering operate this? Is this something that we can actually do? Commercial attorneys may help with various parts of the agreement, and then partners. So I'm looking at the list, and yeah, I go across all those. Go ahead, Adrienne.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Charlie. And yeah, I just wanted to call out that often it's the lawyer that is helping to make sure there's clarity around what is AI. There's a lot of excitement about AI, and Charlie and I saw a lot of excitement around AI 5+ years ago at Microsoft, right? And a lot of people will say, okay, yes, I want to use AI, I want to be cutting edge, and I'm going to own it. But you have to be really specific, and you have to be able to understand what is the it. Is it an algorithm? Is it a large language model? And if it's an algorithm that a customer is getting from another entity, then they want to say, well, everything that this is now owned by me. But the reality is that the algorithm is a model. It's a framework that can be duplicated. And so whether I run the algorithm on behalf of M&M's manufacturing, or whether I run the algorithm against Disney parks, people that are waiting in line, or whether I run it in Coca-Cola, it can be the same algorithm. So those three customers don't own the original algorithm. So my point is, as a tech lawyer, part of what you're doing is parsing out what the technology is, who owns it, whether or not the technology, the part that's being shared or licensed or anything, is something that is creating a new IP, or whether it's basically a tool that's being just applied to someone's data at the end of the day, but is more utility than it is, breaking patentable or copyrightable code. So part of what we do is determine the truth of the matter.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you all for that. And I think for the students here, you can see the plethora of career opportunities that there are for you in the tech space. And that's something to really think about, because a lot of lawyers say, oh, they want to be entertainment lawyers. And I often say to them, but wouldn't you be happy working at Google or Microsoft or CrowdStrike? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, you got to rethink this then. You got to rethink about yourself as a tech lawyer or an IP lawyer, so that you can get all the opportunities that are potentially out there for you at companies like Verizon, AT&T. I mean, there's lots of opportunities. So I think this has been great. And piggybacking on that, I guess, for each one of you, if you could give us some ideas of some advice that you would give students, and also some things that maybe you were told in the past that didn't turn out to be accurate, or that weren't actually the best advice, and how you would reframe that sitting here today after the experiences that you've had. Charlie, why don't we start with you?
Now we get to the good stuff. I said this earlier in responding to one of the award recipients, that I asked, where would you want to be working in 5 years? And we're taught in law school to kind of hedge. When you're going on the interview, don't say you want to do this or that. Just say I'm open. I think that was a strategy that worked in the past when we were just trying to get in the door. Now it's enough of us in the door that should be able to reach back and open the door for others. So I encourage people to move with purpose. Figure out what makes you happy. What is it that you like to do? And then create a path, try to chart a path to do that. And that's why exposure to attorneys who are doing different things like this is so helpful. I'll keep that one short. Michele was on this panel with me last year, so she know we got a whole list of stuff, but go ahead, Adrienne or Michele.
Okay, sure.
Move
Michele?
with purpose.
I was going to say, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I may have made is not specializing. But because as a general litigator, I would just take whatever case came to my desk. And my skill set was to be a litigator. The problem with that was I didn't have enough of the same type of cases to become extremely knowledgeable about a particular subject matter. And for us, and I think y'all know which us I'm talking about, we need to be able to be the expert in the room on X, Y, or Z. And so it did not serve me well that I was an expert litigator. I think it would have benefited me more had I been an expert in AI or in privacy or in Food and Drug Administration law, something, because that would have made me more marketable. Now, I recovered from that, obviously, and I'm very happy with where I am now. And so all of those that challenge set me up for this opportunity. But I think that if you, as a student listening, are pretty have a deep interest in a particular area, pursue that path, keep your eyes open, stay open to opportunity,
Mhm.
but build up expertise in some subject matter along the way, because I think that will serve you much better than just having a general skill set.
Mhm.
And
Thank
if I
you.
can piggyback on what Michele just said, you don't have to wait until you have X number of years of practice in order to build that speciality or that awareness. Follow your curiosity. And I say this next part to folks that want to start out in entertainment and folks that want to start out in tech, which is this. Um, Technology, our phones, the internet, all these platforms, YouTube, where you can get all this information and listen into things, have democratized access to information, right? But here's how it plays out for us as professionals. If you think you want to know more about AI, go to YouTube and watch the reports to the congressional hearings on AI. If you think you want to know more about AI, you know how you get those pings that say that the various apps you use have updated their terms? Guess why they updated their terms the last 2 years, everybody? They updated their terms to add AI language. Read the terms for all of the services that you are a part of. Read the terms for Netflix. Read the terms for Spotify. And if you read it through both the consumer lens and what's important to you, but also an attorney lens, you begin to understand, the factors, the consideration, the laws, and the business imperatives behind the language and the things that in these terms that we are all now beholden to. Right. And so as you start to pay attention to these, then now when you're talking, you're potentially, whether you're, exploring it academically or in an interview, you can speak knowledgeably about what that company cares about, what the country is thinking about, where we're going from a regulatory perspective without ever having been paid for such insight. So invest in yourself, stay curious, right? And follow the information. Who you're following on your socials should help you build your knowledge base, your career, and your network. So that's really, really important.
Excellent, excellent advice, Adrienne. Excellent advice for young folks. And in fact, I do things like that too. Or if I have a client that comes to me and needs terms of use or a privacy policy, I go look at other similar business models and go pull all of theirs to look at what's going on in order to help develop that. So great advice, Adrienne.
Yeah, and if I may, that was actually also part of my job when I was in-house, right? I have clients that'll come and they'll say, how come we want to do X and competitor is doing X, but we're not doing X here. Why aren't we doing it? Right. And so part of my job in figuring out is, well, what do our terms say and what does that company's terms say? And
Right.
what's the difference, right? And then I'm not going to respond to my clients and say, well, you just can't, or we just haven't. I'm going to say, we don't have the language here that says if we want to do it, then this is what it's going to take.
Right. And you mentioned clients, Adrienne, and that's a good point. I think for in-house lawyers, who their clients are is important for students to understand, because their clients are actually the other people that in the corporation that work in different departments. So if you could just talk about that just a little bit so they get an understanding for the client in the context of in-house counsel.
Yes, absolutely. So your clients are going to be the people that work in the departments in the areas that you support. So if you're if you're a product attorney, then your clients are the engineers, right? The technical people that are actually creating and building the product. And it's going to be the business people that are deciding the direction for the product. If you're in sales and marketing, it could be, the teams that are developing the marketing collateral around the product. It could be the ones that are going to create the ads around the product. If you're in the commercial team, it could be the internal sellers that are going to be negotiating the terms with, let's say, enterprise clients. And so they have a lead on a very big, high value opportunity with another company, and they say, hey, I need you as my lawyer, right, to paper this. And oh, by the way, it has to be done by the end of the month, right? So things like that. And then regulatory, a lot of the regulatory roles are kind of fall under subject matter experts, which means they may get called from, all these different areas to help interpret the rules, the guardrails for their specific areas. And then, by the way, another set of clients that you have are the company executives. And so sometimes you just get called and you're told, VP or president so-and-so or C-suite so-and-so is about to do this thing or speak, or, and we need you as the lawyer to review it, or this person has been tapped to serve on the board of another company. Is there a conflict? So the other executives in the company are your clients too.
Right. Yeah, that's important to know. So now let's turn our discussion just a little bit. And, I'm going to start out this by saying that I myself have stopped using the word minority to describe people of color in any situation. And I've done that because the realities are that we're not necessarily minorities. And as the demographics of America and Europe as well are changing, those words are going to have new meanings. And so I think we have to be careful about using that, especially in light of this new Supreme Court decision and affirmative action decision. And so regarding attorneys of color, and obviously in particular African Americans, I just want maybe you, Michele, to address some of the unique situations that you find yourself in at work. And I know for myself and for a lot of my colleagues as well, we have kind of I wouldn't say two different personalities, but there's your work persona and then there's the other persona that you have. And I think in today's world, when I started out, you definitely had to keep those things very distinct. In today's world, that's not as problematic as it was when I first started out in a big law firm. So why don't you address that for us, Michele? Sorry.
So the stories I could tell are voluminous and could fill up all those bookshelves behind Adrienne. But I think this finding the right work environment changed everything. Working around other professionals who respect you, working for a company that has amazing values and a zero tolerance for any foolish behavior has literally completely changed my professional and personal existence. So if you don't hear anything else today from me, you do not have to work in a place that makes you feel like you cannot be who you are and that you cannot live a fulfilling and fruitful life both at work and outside of work. There is not enough money in the world for me to go back to some of the environments that I was in before. And I spent too much time there. We talked about, what's some things you would do differently. Don't spend time in a toxic environment. It is a bad relationship, and you walk away from that relationship with PTSD. So go to a place that appreciates you. You can show up as your full self, and you are not erasing who you are. Now, you do have to edit sometimes. I did have to, there are some things that are just, professional behavior. So I wouldn't be dishonest if I told you that I would. I'm an old lady now, so I'm just, I act the same all the time. But 25-year-old me may have been a little bit different, and I needed to edit a lot more at work than I do now because, I'm just Miss Lawyer all the time. But editing is something that is a professional practice that many of us have to do. And we go to work a certain way. Like, I'm not going to wear a halter top at work. I'm not going to wear a mini skirt at work. I'm not going to do certain things that's edited that I may do when I'm at home that is appropriate, but it's not appropriate at the office. Editing is different than erasing. At my old job, I did not let anyone know that I had a child until she was almost 3. They had no idea because I didn't want them to think that as a mother, I couldn't work 100 hours a week. I shouldn't have been working 100 hours a week anyway, but I didn't want them to think that they couldn't give me a certain assignment, that I wouldn't be able to travel, that I didn't have this, that I didn't have that. And on top of that, I was a single mom at the time. So that came with another set of stereotypes that would have been put on me at work. So I erased that part of my identity. I don't advise working somewhere where you have to erase, but we do have to edit. And so professional etiquette, having a certain decorum in an office is something that is expected, but you don't have to not be, I don't have to not be a Black woman at work anymore. And I'm not dealing with, oh, Michele, go get the copies off the machine, or Michele, can you take notes? No, all of y'all can type. So like those kind of things, because I'm not in a type toxic work environment anymore, I'm not dealing with. So.
Charlie, you know we have to hear from you.
Charlie is free now. Charlie has learned a lot of lessons. I like to tell people, when I was in the toxic environment, I wasn't able to be my best and didn't realize it until I kind of, God forced me to be removed. I probably would have stayed there, but I owned probably every Jose Bank shirt and khakis there are. And I remember at that time, I was always uncomfortable because that wasn't me. I was trying to look and fit in. What I've learned now is there's value in your diversity and your perspective. And I echo what Michele said. I'm at the stage, I'm an old man now, where I'm celebrated. You're not going to tolerate me. You're not going to tell me next year you can do this. Like, at this stage, I know my experience. We talked about all of the different internal stakeholders and the various areas. Like I said, I know enough about each one of those areas where I know when someone else doesn't know what they know. And what you'll find is it's a lot of people in positions that shouldn't have those positions. Um, I hear a lot of people talk about struggling with the imposter syndrome. I went to 3 HBCUs. I've never struggled with the imposter syndrome. I've always known who I am. But when I say I'm free now, uh, I like Michele's point about editing. We don't have to edit as much because we're sophisticated. We're intelligent human beings anyway, so we're not gonna do certain stuff. But I mean, I just came from our sales kickoff, and I'm walking around with a white T-shirt and chains, and everybody knows my tag says Assistant General Counsel because I've helped so many people. I get past that stereotype, like, nah, y'all, he's smart. He helped me close my deal. We're happy he's here. So you want to go where you can be your authentic self, because what I learned is when I wasn't, I was, it takes, there's this book, oh, Adrienne, you might remember it. Just getting old, my brain just froze on me. It'll come to me, but it talks about the mental tax. Whistling Vivaldi, get that book. I'll put it in the chat. It talks about the mental tax and how we can't be ourselves when we're trying so hard and placing so much energy on not being what the negative stereotype is that somebody else would think of. I got over that, and the way I explain it is, when you look at like Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, the founder of Facebook, or Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, I remember there was an article talking about how they have to make such big decisions. They don't spend a lot of their brain power on what they're going to wear. They just decide, this is my garb. I'm not going to spend, I have to choose where I spend my mental RAM. And I've gotten to that stage of, you know what, I don't care what you guys think about how I look. I'm going to focus on the details that matter, using my brain power to help solve your big problems. And when you solve big problems, you can't get to this freedom stage unless you're excellent. You gotta
That's
be.
what I was going to say. You've got to be an expert. You got to know what you're doing. And you also have to walk with the confidence of it. You can't be afraid. You have to walk with your confidence.
Yeah. So
Adrienne,
I'll
anything?
stop
Oh,
there.
sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So my early career days were a little bit different. I actually started practicing in the law firm of Hustle alum Ed Woods. who, is no longer with us, unfortunately. But my point is, I had the pleasure of beginning right in entertainment, right in my home town in New York with, leadership that was pouring into me. I knew I was supported, but I also knew I had to work hard. I had to prove myself. It was a office environment on 42nd Street on the east side of Manhattan, where, any client could come in at any time. And sometimes the Ed Woods and others' names on the door, they knew what their schedule was like. So sometimes they would come in, in a very authentic Ed Woods ensemble, right? So you may see the chain, you might see the, the hoodies or whatever, right? But I hadn't earned that yet. And I understood I hadn't earned that yet. More important to me, and this is very internalized to me, again, I was practicing in my hometown in an area, entertainment, where I had people, my contemporaries that I grew up with, that were also in that industry. And so it was important to me to look professional. So even though others may have been dressed down, I never had to have, I never did white shoe law. So I never had to have a closet full of suits, right? But I made sure to have blazers or blouses. And, my point is, I wanted to be taken seriously. I didn't want people to kick it with me like they could, like they might run into me someplace else just around the city. So that part was really important for me to kind of show up as a professional. When I switched gears and entered the tech space, tech is also historically casual, buttoned down, right? If you look at the old, the videos of tech leaders, tech CEOs, they've got turtlenecks, t-shirts, right? And that's how my clients looked. I wasn't comfortable entering the building or joining the Zoom calls in that way because I'm 5'3". I'm an African-American woman, right? And I've been fortunate enough for people to get my age wrong. So I'm older than both of the prior two speakers who keep talking about feeling old. I'm older than both of them, I promise you. And so most people don't think I am. And so I wanted to project a professionalism that belied what they saw, well, what they thought they saw, right? And so I was fortunate enough to, at least have environments that allowed me to, I guess, edit or, project, right? And still kind of feel, welcomed in that. But I guess what I'm saying is a lot of it is I felt self-imposed. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I'll just make a few comments quickly because, as I said, I started out in the 80s. So in a much different environment where, things changed a lot, not only for, people of color, but just in corporate America and law firms in general. You always had to have on a suit. You had to be, stockings for a woman, no bright lipstick, hair done a certain way when I started. And then Casual Fridays started. That was the first crack in the system. Started out as Casual Fridays, and all of a sudden you could come to work in jeans and, a polo shirt, or, if you're a female in something comparable. And that began a wave that changed corporate America, really, quite frankly, in law firms in particular, in terms of what is the kind of requirement of not only how you dress, but how you act. When I started at Sherman and Sterling in New York, a major Wall Street law firm. And the first thing they did was send us to etiquette class and taught us how to eat at a corporate lunch, at a client lunch, how to hold, your glass, what all the silverware, where it's supposed to be sitting. They taught us all of that walking in the door. Like that was the first thing we did as associates coming into the firm. But as I said, not, a few years into that, this Casual Friday thing started. And here we are today where I'm at a firm now and nobody wears suits unless you're going to court or you have some special meeting or something else to happen. Now, at the same time, we're not coming in hoodies and sweatsuits either. I mean, there's a professionalism that's expected, but I wear my jeans with the holes in them to work. And sometimes I'll have on a jacket if I'm going to be on a Zoom. So a lot has changed over time. But let's talk about social justice now quickly. I know we got to get some questions in too, but I know in my practice, so I was in a private practice for almost 20 years, and I dedicated a lot of what I did to helping African-American artists and small business people. And I kind of took that very seriously in terms of, us being cut out, African-American artists not being properly paid by record companies and all kinds of things like that. So I want to get some perspective on how you guys see social justice and where it fits in tech law. And I know there's lots of issues that we could go on and on about, digital divides and all kinds of things, but if each one of you could quickly give us a perspective on where you see social justice issues in your practice, and then we can open up for some questions.
So I can quickly weigh in on this because my job, I'm in a unique position where I manage our relationships with civil rights organizations. So I am working directly with the organizations, getting their perspective, understanding what they want in whatever policy issue or space that we're working in, and working together to see where those points of agreement are, and then we are stronger together, so we can advocate together. So there have been many instances where we we need to bring the outside in. We can't just have this bubble inside of corporate America where we don't understand what's happening on the ground. And I absolutely love that part of my job because I can really keep in touch with what is happening on the outside and then make influence from the inside for actual real change. Also, one thing that I did not realize before I was in-house is how much pro bono work in-house lawyers do. Verizon has a huge pro bono program. And so outside of the legal department have volunteer initiatives. So there are so many different ways to give back, either for me uniquely positioned in my actual day job, or through pro bono activities, or through volunteer activities. So those are just three ways that we are able to stay in touch, and you can choose whatever you want to do, whatever is your passion project, and you can incorporate that into your work in-house.
Adrienne?
Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Lita. Yeah, I would say, fortunately, tech is, it leans towards more inclusive work environments. My experience has been that the tech industry is more amenable than like the category of corporate America that is twice as, if you're talking about a 50-plus-year-old company, Microsoft is not yet 50, Facebook is not yet 20, right? Google, yeah, so if you think about Google's not yet 25, I don't think, so the tech companies tend to lean into more corporate responsibility, lean into inclusivity. Doesn't mean they've gotten it all right, but I do think you have an opportunity to find scenarios where there's at least already a vocabulary, a set of supports, employee resource groups, intentional hiring, intentional pipeline planning, intentional development and promotion within its organization, and a intentionality around doing more out externally. That said, part of what you can do is learn about it before you join, right? I think it is a topic that recruiters are becoming comfortable speaking on. And my recommendation, and if you are bringing that up or if you are considering it, bring it up in a way that lets the organization tell you where their aims are, because I think that there's corporate culture, and then there are teams within the company that are at various levels of adoption of that culture, right? And then also consider what you bring or what's important to you. I think it's very fair to say early in your career, I want a portion of my time to be dedicated to social justice issues, equity issues, and, and things like that. So I do think that corporate America has a role. I've been encouraged by the intentionality that I've seen in corporate America. I've also been disappointed because it doesn't go far enough. I've also seen, decisions that are made, and it's the application of very standardized, processes that, just like laws and economic opportunity, disproportionately affect in a negative way people of color, right? So it's not a utopia by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a promising, I would say, landscape. Tech in corporate America is a promising landscape to do social justice work.
Yeah, and we're still last in, first out, unfortunately, but we're working on that, right?
I would say it's personal to me. I'm not going to vouch for corporate America in any way. I think if it's something that you're passionate about, and you kind of touched on this, Adrienne, and it goes to this theme of living purposefully. If you don't dictate what you do with your time, others will be glad to help you. So even outside of your corporate role, if you're about that social justice life, you're going to find opportunities. And we've all been blessed with a skill set, and you figure out, how can I use my skill set to help my people? That was one of the things that I hated at the law firm, because as a junior associate, I wanted to use my knowledge to help other entrepreneurs. And trying to be a good corporate citizen, the law firm citizen, I would bring it like, hey, here's their company. Can I take this case on? I'm trying to go through the process and do it the right way. And they're like, yeah, nah, son, you just focus on what you need to do. Now I can, in my spare time, I can help my people. However, I see that I can help my people. And there's always boards. Michele, you mentioned this. It was a great commercial for Verizon, by the way. I want to say to the students, if you can get hired at Verizon, you want to go to Verizon. I sit on the board of the Georgia Justice Project. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. In my family, we ain't a bunch of college goers. I got a bunch of people who have been in the institutional system. And so the Georgia Justice Project works on helping people who have a second chance. It's hard once you've been institutionalized to get kind of reintegrated into society, because society is moving fast, mainly because of tech. But the short is, make it your personal business. You can't, and Adrienne, you may recall this, Bruce Jackson, one of our mentors at Microsoft, hired a bunch of Black people at one time. And his reasoning was, if we don't do it, how are we going to expect them to do it? If you got a bunch of roles and you're not hiring your people, how are you going to expect them to do it? One of the excuses is it's hard to find, I don't want to use minority, because I like the point that you made there, Lita. It's hard to find diverse talent. Well, if you have a chance to hire, and you still scared in this age to hire an African American, even though you see your colleagues have no problem hiring inexperienced, low personal skills, low soft skill, mediocre, average people, why you got a problem hiring your people? So I'll stop there, because we can go on, and I want us to get some questions too, Lita.
And I just want to say, Bruce Jackson, that was incredible when Bruce Jackson did that. He brought so many African Americans into Microsoft. Like, he needs an award for what he did at that time. It was really, truly incredible. So just a word
right
for that. Okay, so questions. How are we getting our questions here, Charlie, from the audience?
It'll come up. Students, anybody who's on, this is your chance. You're gonna get some real answers, and I think we've gotten a lot of real answers previously as well. But this is your chance to ask questions. You got great lawyers here. I feel like most of the people I talk to through LinkedIn, and please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. But if you got questions, just type them in the chat. We will see them and we'll address them.
While we're waiting for the question, let me circle back, I made a point earlier where I was saying, hey, you can do a lot of research and build knowledge on your own, about whatever area you may be interested in before it is your job to do that, right? You can build your expertise. You can do this in the social justice area as well. So if there's an area that you are focused in, not only can you serve, you can use your spare time, but companies are making public what their initiatives and what their pledges are. And if you start to read that, I promise you, you'll have an opinion on it. You'll either think, this is awesome, or this isn't enough, or is that all they can do? Are you kidding me? And guess what, though? That gives you the language, and it gives you kind of a barometer that helps you determine whether, that corporation might be a good fit, right? Or whether or not they're ready, to do more, right? Whether they could be the place where you can kind of magnify your efforts.
Right. And I'll just notice, I say in the chat that Verizon's Black Employee Research Group is 40 years old, which is pretty incredible. Affinity groups, as they're called within corporations and law firms, are groups that come together, typically maybe based upon the same race or women's groups or whatever. So students, if you hear someone talking about affinity groups, that's what they're talking about. In corporate America or law firms, they're talking about groups like, the Black lawyers, there are the Asian lawyers, or female lawyers, or lawyers with a certain interest group. That's what we mean by affinity groups.
And I'll say on that point, if you are interviewing at a firm, ask about it. And if they don't have them, that's a red flag. I'm sorry.
Agreed.
And also, if a firm doesn't do pro bono work, that's also a red flag. I was interviewing, I remember doing OCI and asking about the pro bono program. And one firm looked at me like I was crazy and just was like, pro bono, we don't do that. And so I wasn't going there. Pro bono not only gives you an opportunity to dig into these issues that you care about, it's some of the cases where you can cut your teeth and get some of your best opportunities. I took my first deposition in a pro bono case. I wrote some of my first briefs in a pro bono case, did my first oral arguments in a pro bono case. So you need to go somewhere not only that has pro bono because you can work on issues that you care about, but also because you can get some very substantive experiences, and you can build relationships with key partners at these firms who will take you for a pro bono case sometimes before they'll take you for a real billable case. And then you can let them get to know you, show them your skills. And, sometimes we have to go through an extra layer of proving ourselves, but that could be that extra layer of proving yourself to get into those billable cases that will then propel you to new heights at the firm.
That's a great point. There's definitely been scenarios in-house as well where, as a person of color, I or I've witnessed others been subjected to an additional layer of proof that you can do, what it is that that you're tasked to do in your job. I've seen lawyers of color being asked to submit a writing sample prior to the terms of the agreement. I personally had an agreement that I, basically created that version of, only to have a white lawyer hire outside counsel to basically edit or call out potential concerns with my template. And by the way, myself and this white lawyer, we worked for the same company. So he spent company money to hire outside counsel to find potential weaknesses in a company agreement that I, blessed was using, basically. And so, yeah, that happened.
That's
okay. I don't see any questions coming up here, students. I see some thank yous coming into the panelists. But I guess if we don't have any questions, thank you all. And I think this was a great panel personally. And I wish all of you students the best of luck. And, it's good to reach out to any of us or, other people like us to get questions asked, answered, and to, try to establish relationships. And, look for a sponsor. I don't know if you know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, but a mentor is someone who just generally kind of gives you information, talks to you every now and then. But a sponsor is someone who actually helps get you a job and helps put you in positions where you can actually have a beneficial situation for your professional career. So thank you all.